Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Peak Growth Educational Podcast. Today we have with us Kyle King. He is an author and a founder in the e learning space. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you so much for having me. I definitely appreciate being here.
Amazing. Thank you for taking the time to record this. So, I want to get started by finding out what was the thing that first pulled you in the e learning space?
That's a great question. Again, for the audience, my name is Kyle King. I'm the CEO and founder of the Culture Lab. Prior to the Culture Lab, I've served in education for over a decade. I've taught K-12 education as an eighth grade ELA teacher. I was a director of school culture and student advancement at a nationally recognized charter school based in North Carolina. I've been an AP, a dean of students, and even worked in the entrepreneurial space adjacent to education, running summer programs, after school programs, and building an educational facility that helps students. My start was unique, very different than a lot of people that are traditionally in the educational system as a whole. Years ago, I wrote a book called The Mission Plan, The Discovery, and The Destiny and the Decision. It was a three-part series that was geared to helping high school and college students navigate through the K-12 as well as college educational space. What I found back then is that our students were struggling. They didn't have mentors. They didn't have a clear pathway to be able to identify goals, to be able to identify how to understand what was their unique selling proposition so that they can be able to position themselves as not just marketable to companies, but also position themselves as authorities as they navigate the complexities of this global economy. So I wrote a book back then and published it. It did very well, and it got me introduced to schools around the country where I was able to come in and professionally speak and help them work with these students on creating opportunities to expose them to what's possible. That then led me to working within schools to partner with them on a multitude of projects, how to increase enrollment, how to develop curriculums that were students were represented appropriately in these curriculums. And then over time, I started understanding and identifying opportunities and problems and gaps. So that led me to building a publishing company that worked with educators. Over time, that we exited from there. It allowed me to step on boards of education and work collectively with solving some of the lacking of equity across the educational system. And then that continued to grow. And then it offered me an opportunity to start and found the Culture Lab, which is a nationally recognized organization that is helping schools, charter and private schools, fundraise smarter, build communities, and have more purpose-driven growth. And what that looks like is we come in and we identify four things, like what are the things that you're truly doing great, how can we mobilize resources, how can we build communities around those resources, and how can we help your school be more sustainable and achieve higher academically as well. So that's what got my start. That's what I'm doing now. And that's how important education is to me, because I wanted to be able to work in a multitude of areas so that I can understand all of them.
That's an amazing story, and curious about the beginnings of the Culture Lab. How did you decide to start it?
That's a good question. So at the time when I started the Culture Lab, I was a board of directors at a charter school based in North Carolina. I recognized at the time that we had a real culture issue at the school that I was partnering with. And what I mean by culture issue is that our leaders were not engaging or collaborating together. Students were not being pushed academically to be able to achieve at a higher standard. Parents were disconnected from really committing. They were disconnected to the mission, vision, and values of the school. And we did not have a clear pipeline to partnerships outside of the school community. So there was a lot of work that needed to be done. With all of this, it was causing us to be underachieving from a school. We were a D and then even an F school. And even though we had beautiful buildings, we had brand new uniforms, we had all of this great things on the outside, when we pulled back the curtain and really started to look at some of the challenges that we were experiencing inside of the school, we needed to understand how to solve some of these problems. I look at culture from the perspective of it's like a pimple that you have on your face. And a lot of times schools put a band-aid over the pimple just so that someone can't see it, rather than pinching it, seeing what's inside of it, that's causing this pimple on your face and then actually treating the issue under the surface. So I wanted to treat the issue under the surface. So I stepped off the board and I served as a director of school culture and student advancement because I believe that the best form of leadership is not leading behind a desk, it's leading on the ground. So I wanted to be on the ground, working with students, working with teachers, working with the community and parents, and helping them understand, who are we, what are we doing, and how can we work collectively and build an ecosystem so that we can be able to produce better results as a school. That led me to releasing Contagious Culture, creating an ecosystem of academic excellence. And then once I released my book, then that allowed me to get introduced and invited to speak at a multitude of places around the country. I was speaking in Minnesota, I was speaking in Philly, I was speaking in Atlanta on this idea of contagious culture. And at the time, I hadn't even really fleshed out what it meant yet. But I knew we were doing this work, we were seeing improvements, we were seeing changes, and I wanted to tell as many people as I could about it. Then what happened is I stepped down from that position after I finished up the year because there was a high demand for me to show other people around the country on how to do this work. So I recognized that from a time capacity standpoint, it was time to transition into this work. It was time to share this model with schools around the country. And then we fully immersed ourselves in the culture lab and began to bring on interns. We brought on social impact specialists to be able to support this work with us. And now we're doing this work at a high level.
All right. So, from what I understand, the moment where everything clicked was when you launched your first book. Am I correct?
I think the moment where everything clicked is when I was on the board of directors at a charter school and I realized how messed up the school was because of some of the
Interesting.
things that were happening at the school. And it was my responsibility to step off the board and get to the ground to solve some of these issues.
That's interesting. You know what I believe people will be asking right now?
Hmm.
So, you realize there were some issues with the
Oh,
school,
of course.
and now you fix those issues, right? But there was a process from finding out about the issues and
Hmm.
discovering the mechanism of solving the issues. How did you go from acknowledging the issues to actually finding ways to get rid of them?
That's a great question. And one of the things that I've always prided myself on is identifying. I think 90% of people, and even probably 90% of the people listening, know how to identify problems. Everyone has an issue with something. A lot of people, probably 10%, and where I believe the difference between a contributor and a leader is identifying problems, but then also identifying potential solutions. And I think it's a mindset shift of what I've and how I approach the work. It's not we have a problem culturally. It's more so how do we improve our cultural issues? How do we improve our academics? How do we improve the relationships between our parents, our teachers, and our board? So I started asking myself the how questions, but you can't be informed when you're asking questions on how to solve problems if you're not listening to the people. So what I did is I went on a listening tour. I started asking teachers, hey, if the school was absolutely perfect, what would you want to see? What would you want to do? I started talking to teachers and I started talking to parents and I started talking to students and I started talking to principals and leaders. And I started listening to if our school was perfect, what would it look like? What would people want? And then I started looking at, okay, well, if you were the director, if you were the board, how would you implement it? And then I started getting all of these ideas. And then I wanted to be the person to present it to the board. So I needed to figure out after talking to 200 people, these are the issues. This is what they want, but I wanted to be the person that was clear in how to build a system to be able to create that initiative. So I built the system. So I understood where we are, and that's point A. I understood where we wanted to be, that's point Z. Everything in the middle is what we call the transformative process. And how can we work all of these problems together? How do we identify priorities? Based upon those priorities, what are the impact when we start to solve these specific problems? And then I put together a plan, which was the contagious culture framework, and then being able to implement those changes across the school year.
All right. So listening to the people is the beginning, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I have an interesting question right now. So the technology and society is evolving at an accelerated pace. I would
Mhm.
say it's evolving faster than it ever did. So I believe the education space is also evolving very, very quickly. So my question is, how can you adapt to these fast changes? Because does it still make sense to listen to the people? Is it the same scenario?
You know,
Because
I think
it's
that's
new for
one of
them as
the
well.
that's one of the greatest people are our greatest attribute. And I think in any organization, I would recommend any leader to listen to people first. We have to have more of a people first approach when we're working to creating change. I say that because there's no technology, there's no AI, there's no innovation that will replace the importance of listening to individual contributors and stakeholders to be able to create change within an organization. That's my first point. However, I do believe that there is a demand for a better learning experience, a personalized learning experience when we think about student agency in education as a whole. And that's why AI and some of these platforms, such as Otis, such as what's another one, Kedem, and these AI platforms that are creating more student agency so that we can integrate what students need, what students want to be able to ultimately create a better learning experience for our students in the classroom. One of the biggest challenges that we see across the board is engagement. We have engagement issues because we're not able to differentiate and blend learning in a way that speaks to the needs and the wants of every single student across the board. If we're not able to do that, we have to be more data centric and understand how to review and analyze data so that we can create a better learning experience in the classroom. However, with those two tools, I believe in tools that are, being introduced into educational models. I believe that when these tools are fully integrated and immersed in educational systems, this will allow us to be able to improve student agency, have more data centric lesson planning, and be able for us to drive achievement and growth and progress in the classroom where we're seeing higher student achievement scores.
How far away are we from this?
I think we're there. I think we are we're here. The problem that I've seen with education though, I think education as a whole is probably a decade away from truly being able to have a bridge between business and academia. Education, especially K-12 education, has always been behind the curve. And there's a gap, there's a disconnect between fully immersing ourselves with what the economy is demanding and what the economy needs versus what we're actually teaching students. And the problem is that educators are a part of a lot of these changes that are not happening in education. I believe that educators are not the solution to the problems that we need to solve in the educational system. I believe if we begin to integrate businesses and we begin to allow industry to be a part of these conversations, to be a part of these laws, to be a part of these policies, to be a part of some of these school boards, I believe that shift will allow our students to actually know the skills necessary to be able to produce the demands in AI and how we can be able to be a more skill-based approach in educational systems rather than this cookie cutter traditional educational model.
It's very interesting you mentioned that because I also feel like there's a very common sentiment, especially across the Gen Z generation,
Mm-hmm.
that school hardly prepares them for the actual job marketplace.
100%. And I think not just the job market, and I agree. I think just basic adulthood in a sense. School didn't teach me how to be a business owner, how to break down complex problems to be able to identify solutions. School doesn't teach you how to leverage debt to be able to build wealth. School doesn't teach you tax codes and how in economics how to approach these various problems. School didn't teach you how you can take a skill set and be able to produce online. Why aren't we integrating in school? If 90% of students have social media accounts, then why in math class are we teaching outdated math models rather than teaching data analytics, leveraging TikTok, Instagram, or some of these social media platforms in class to be able to bridge student interest and student agency with actually what's happening in the global economy? How are we teaching the impact of tariffs and the Trump administration, how that's actually impacting education and the jobs that we're going to want and see. How are we teaching this in classes? Students are clueless because educators are teaching a traditional whitewashed curriculum that is not able to produce the next generation of leaders. That's why we have schools like and that's why we love working with charter schools and private schools, because they're more niche and they're more unique in how they approach education, which allows them to customize their model as we start to see what the global economy is requiring from us.
So, can you tell me something specific that you guys do to try to bridge the gap between the traditional learning and the modern world?
We connect and bridge the gap between business and academia. How we do that is schools work in a silo. And what we mean from creating an ecosystem of academic excellence, what that looks like is when we look at an ecosystem as a whole, everything works collectively. If we removed bees from the atmosphere, there's going to be a trickle effect on how that impacts all types of things within our just the way that we live as a whole. If we remove teachers from education, it will impact things. If we remove students, if we removed parents, if we removed certain things. But one of the things that we've removed that we don't even know that we've removed is business owners, corporate leaders, executives of companies, and the business community. It's never been fully immersed in education. So when a school wants to be able to grow or expand or create opportunities for students, whether it's job shadowing, internship opportunities, an endowment fund, or even expand to build a new turf field, then why aren't we adopting the community, the business owners, as a part of that conversation? So one of the schools that we're working with based in Minnesota, we're helping them on a $25 million capital campaign. They raised $14 million last year, and we began to engage with them to be able to help them produce the additional 11 million this year. And how we're doing that is connecting them with corporations so that we can integrate corporate giving programs to be able to support the school in mobilizing resources. As a part of that, one of the organizations that we're working with is on a mission to build tech centers and tech hubs in schools so that those students that go through that tech hub can be able to have the skills, the techniques, as well as the development or develop these students in a way so that they can be able to produce in the tech industry. So it's not just giving money, it's being able to provide opportunities so that we can have workforce development programs. So we're bridging the gap and we're helping to fill these gaps in education by connecting industry leaders with schools so that our students can be a part of solving some of these issues that our corporations and global economy are experiencing.
Sounds amazing. I think you do a very, very useful thing for the next generation. Not only for the next generation, but actually this has a big impact over everyone. It's not just about students. The next generation will have jobs and will move the economy forward. The impact will be felt by 50, 60, 70 years old. The economy will be different. I'm curious, what's the biggest bottleneck when it comes to working with institutions?
I believe the biggest challenge in working with institutions are people, just like anything. I think the processes are there, the systems are there. I believe it's people because similar to what I'm communicating to you, there may be millions of educators that feel completely different. But my passion to be able to make some of these changes in our educational system has nothing to do with the conversations that I've had with leaders because they're the last stop. It's the conversations that I've had with parents. It's the conversations that I've had with students. It's the conversations that I've had with corporate leaders that are saying that students are graduating from these institutions and not prepared and not ready to be able to produce at a high level. So when we look at all of the stakeholders that are impacted by these educational systems, I believe some of the bottlenecks are the personnel within these organizations and in these institutions that are not truly invested in equipping these students with what they need to not just survive in the global economy, especially in the Western world, but to be able to produce at a high level and not just be individual contributors.
All right. So, thinking fast forward a year from now, How many institutions do you guys hope to serve?
That's a great question. Our goal on our 5-year plan, so let's break it down to 1 year. We would want to be in 40 institutions by the 2026-2027 school year.
How many institutions are you working with right now?
12.
12.
Yeah.
That's an ambitious number.
Oh no, it's definitely ambitious, but 12 schools within 6 months was ambitious. Was ambitious. So we want to be able to almost triple that number within a calendar year.
I'm sure you have the capability to hit that goal. From what I learned during this conversation, what you do provide to those institutions is very, very, very beneficial for every single member of society. And I believe that the more exposure you get to this kind of thing, doesn't matter is necessarily like you said, the decision makers.
Yeah.
I believe that every single parent who has a child that's in school and hears you or somebody else talking about this and learning that there are solutions to bridging the gap between what their child is learning in school and the job market will ask the decision makers, why are we not doing this, or when are we doing this?
Exactly. I
So
think
yeah.
we're not doing this because we don't understand the true impact of, if this doesn't happen, how this will truly not just impact our students, but our economy. There was a time where America was #1 in the world in education, in access to opportunities and employment, opportunities once they graduate school, all of these various aspects. And we're not anymore. And it's showing up. And that's why we see a multitude of people from other companies or excuse me, other countries or other places that come here and dominate because they've had a foundation that is just much different. A foundation of taking ownership of this knowledge or understanding that education is the great equalizer rather than just this privilege of I just have to go to school because they say so. And if we continue to approach education like this, it's going to produce a further and further gap, and the wealth gap is going to increase, and the achievement gap is going to get wider, and all of these challenges are going to continue to persist. So anybody listening right now, it's important for you to, first as a parent, to be invested in ensuring your child has the best opportunities academically, but then also socially. As a teacher, integrating a real life application within your classroom so that your students can be engaged, but then also equipped to be able to go to the next level and be able to produce. As a leader, have these conversations, publish work, and be in the know of what's happening in the economy and build your curriculum as well as your programming around what the economy needs, not just what your state board needs. And then students have to do research and be able to understand the importance of competition and how you're not just competing against kids again, in your class, in your school, in your county, you're competing against kids in other countries. So you have to also be able to produce at a high level. And I think once we understand that mindset shift and our own individual responsibilities and contributions to making things better, I believe at that point things will get better.
Sounds amazing. So if anyone wants to learn more or wants maybe to bring your expertise into their institution, how can they do that?
Reach out to us at theculturelab.com. Theculturelab.org, theculturelab.org. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Kyle S. King on LinkedIn, and we'd love to be a part of these conversations with you, answer any questions that you may have, and continue to support this work moving forward.
All right, so the links mentioned by Kyle will be added to this video's description. So if you want to learn more or connect with Kyle on LinkedIn, just click below. And this was an amazing conversation. I really, really like what you do, and I hope that you will be able to serve even more than 40 institutions by the end of next year.
Perfect.
And it was a pleasure talking to you. And
Thank
yeah,
you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
look forward to following the mission plan.
For sure. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Great conversation. See ya.